I just wanted to be a grandmother. What did you want to be when you were little? I just wanted to be a grandmother. My grandparents were unknown to me. My only role models were those in the movies and TV shows. I heard vague stories of my grandparents, and I have only one awkward memory of sitting on my grandfather's knee. He was an alcoholic, so the smell of wine came out of his pores. As I imagine his breath stinking of wine, I find my lips twisting in disgust. There's a sense of his sharp whiskers scraping my cheek. I remember his request. If you kiss me, I'll give you a candy. He offered me something I seldom saw and rarely tasted. Did I kiss him and receive the treat? I'm not so sure. My brothers and sisters appreciated him enough to feel sad when we received news of his drowning about a week or two after we arrived in Canada. Everyone went into disbelief and tears, except me. I was 5. I had no idea what death was. I welcomed the thought of no more pecks on the cheek. I expressed my relief and was rewarded with a slap across the face. According to family folklore, he was a drunken scoundrel, much cared by my mother and supposedly hated by my father. The anger my father had for his father upon hearing of his death was probably more due to his inability to express his pent-up rage. Mom was feeling guilty because she was the one who walked him home after an evening of drinking. She wasn't there this particular New Year's Eve, as we were just a few days into the settling into our new country. New Year's 1958. He walked home alone, fell into a creek, and drowned. Perhaps everyone except my father and I loved him. On second thought, Dad's anger was likely his only way to express love, so it was only me that did not love him. But then, what do preschoolers know about life, death, or love? My grandparents were barely names. Mostly they were Nono and Nona. I was 5 when we immigrated to Canada. Mom and Dad did not only leave a country and a way of life behind. They left their parents, their siblings, the language, everything except their children and whatever they could put into a trunk and suitcases. I knew their world through stories and shared memories. Like many immigrants, they remained stuck in the year of their arrival, while I was free to build a new world, a new life in the country that became mine. I adopted the language, the culture, and the way of life, and became a stranger to their world and to mine. My storybooks and TV shows always flaunted accessible, affectionate parents and grandparents who were nothing like mine. Naturally, those parents were not immigrants. They were white, middle-class families with stay-at-home mothers and fathers in business suits. These depictions of family life were not realistic, and what my Canadian friends learned from their parents was not even imaginable in mine. We were cultures and classes apart. My parents were working-class poor with no skills. They could teach me about dodging bullets and bombs. They taught me how to make moonshine and to be respectful of hard work while trusting in the penny saved rather than a risky venture. My father did not trust anyone in a tie or any form of religion. My mother did not trust priests, but trusted the Bible she never read. My mother remembers a loving grandfather and an unavailable grandmother and mother. She remembers kind aunts and uncles. Mom's dad died in World War I, and so too her mom's brother. Mom and Dad lost brothers in the war following the war that was to end all wars, and that was in World War II, and Dad fought in the resistance. Dad never talked about grandparents. Ongoing trauma was their life, and post-traumatic stress was the family norm. We just did not know that was why the outbursts were our way of life. My mother and my 2 sisters had babies at the same time. She was exhausted from wars, crossing an ocean, and having her 6th child in her 42nd year, and working. There was little energy for the 3 grandchildren and the subsequent 12. In the midst of all this, all I wanted was to grow up and become a grandmother. At 10 years of age, during Mass, I became absorbed with the calendar in my hymnal. checking how many birthdays I might celebrate on a Sunday, and then planned my life accordingly. I will be married at 18 with children at 20. That means meeting a husband at 16. I can do this. I can be a grandmother by 40. At 40, I will know enough and be enough. Most of all, I will have enough of whatever is needed for a loving, happy family where I can be the grandmother. Family is where everyone belongs and is cherished, no matter how imperfect they might be. Family is where every voice is heard, respected, and encouraged. This was not the experience of my 10-year-old self. In an old-fashioned Italian household, boys were royalty, waited upon and coddled by the females. I rebelled, and I did not follow in my older sister's footsteps. Sometimes I begrudgingly picked up after them, made their beds, tidied their rooms, helped with meals, and learned the hard way that it is no use to complain when they teased or bullied me. My brothers thought it was funny to hear me cry or run away in terror when they playfully punched me in the arm. This was not sibling love, even though my parents saw it as normal sibling behavior. They had more important things to worry about than the marks my brothers left on my arm. They were more concerned with paying the bills and putting food on the table. That's why, while pretending to pay attention to whatever the priest had to say, I fantasized about what my life would be like if I had learned enough of everything to be a most welcoming, loving grandmother. Perhaps I thought grandmothers were the glue that held families together, or perhaps I thought that this was when I could be in charge and keep myself and children free of teasing and bullying. Maybe I wanted to be a grandmother so I could play, but I never wanted the job of mothering. Mothers have to discipline. They do housework. They pay bills. They make sure everyone gets enough to eat. Mothers do not have time to play. But grandmothers do. They play and hang out with their grandkids. They sit and listen and have lots of patience. So I wanted to be a grandmother. How can one be one without the other? The book and movies of Cheaper by the Dozen make it seem like children raise themselves. In a way, if one has so many children, it is true that those born first help raise the younger ones. I was 9 when my little brother was born, and for the next 9 years I spent more time with him than our mother did. My older sister parented me until she got married when I was 8 years old. I too left to get married when my brother was 9. It was different for him though. His older brother sometimes lived with them and sometimes not. They managed to have a great relationship, bonding with good humor, name-calling, teasing, and still having each other's backs. He felt left behind as well. In this case, it was left behind to be parented by 2 old people. As a naive, arrogant child and young adult, I was going to do life differently and better than my parents, without walking a yard in their shoes, and yet carrying their triggers in my genes, thanks to epigenetics. To understand myself, there first needed to be a desire to understand them, and a drive to appreciate the physiology of trauma. It was my children's misbehavior that forced me to turn around to look, acknowledge, and see that my parents' love for their children were the sacrifices they made to help us survive. They had no opportunity to give us more. Their children, on the other hand, were in a position to learn, grow, appreciate what they made possible. It was up to us to figure out how to give our children the emotional support that even my parents did not receive. My plan was to do all this, and at the same time, I was going to help to redeem the world. I was going to help redeem the world from pain and suffering with an MSW degree. The academics thinks it stands for Master of Social Work. Some of us think it stands for Must Save the World. Burnout taught me that that was a ludicrous belief. I learned that the way to save the world is by saving myself, by being present to the breeze, the sun, the flowers that are dying and those that are blooming. Most of all, by enjoying as many minutes as I can with each grandchild for as long as I have the privilege to watch them and their true nature emerge. At a luncheon with colleagues, I received a congratulatory card on the birth of my first grandchild. My eyes widened when I read it, yet I could not stop myself from laughing. Neither could anyone at the table when I read it to them. Grandchildren are God's gift to the parents who did not kill their children. Sounds harsh, I know. Yet dark humor has its place. We all could relate to being so frustrated at times with our own children that we questioned our own ability to keep our parenting ideals steadfast and grounded. In my therapy practice, clients who vowed they would never do what their parents did have sheepishly shared how close they had come to being just like them. Me too. I admit to wanting to send my kids off to the other side of the world and hoping they could stay there until they became appreciative adults. I also thought boarding school was a good idea, or sending them to outdoor leadership camps that would keep them away from home months at a time. Thank goodness I could not afford to do so. There were more than a few tears, mostly mine. Happily, the heartaches were also opportunities for personal growth. Bringing up children had great challenges and many tribulations for me. I thought my children would want similar things to their father and I. As it turned out, they're another species. Just as my husband and I did not want what our frustrated parents wanted for us, our children were no different. They had their own unique path to follow. Between 18 and 52, at my children's expense, I figured out a few things, as we had no choice but to grow and learn together. Why 52? Because that's when my first grandchild arrived. And yes, the learning continued and still continues. In the interim, my husband and I had to slog through discovering how not to parent. The insights resulting from my returning to school for a social work degree were invaluable, albeit the changes were not all comfortable. My daughter told me years later, "I didn't exactly like the new you." Really? Why? When you called us down to talk, I didn't know if I would get a lecture or a hug. But wasn't that better than yelling? Well, yes and no. I liked knowing what I was facing by the tone of your voice. Wow, can parents ever win? An MSW gives you permission to be of service to the community. But how do you learn to be a compassionate human being? That only comes from facing your trauma when children and grandchildren trigger your fears. Their very existence is an inspiration to face the root cause of those triggers. As we face them, we become better equipped to be present to them when and if they repeat the parents of their ancestors. It is fascinating how much they have taught me. Giving them what was unavailable to me did not stop their rebellion. It was my job to figure out who these determined strangers were at my dinner table. Children are to be loved without expecting love in return. Love is not always enough. Not everything they did was my fault. Not everything they did is because of my family. Not everything they did is because of their father's family. It is my responsibility to self-regulate. It is my job to teach them how to self-regulate. Genes and nurturance contribute to who they are. Unknown family patterns persist whether I'm aware of them or not. Trauma can be inherited. It's called epigenetics. Further training in trauma work and understanding neurodiversity eased some growing pains. Awareness of ancestral patterns was most enlightening and alleviated some guilt. Somewhere in the confusing goings-on, the next generation found their way into our home. They did not arrive on the schedule of my 10-year-old self. They arrived at the perfect time, sometimes as expected and sometimes not. I was pleasantly surprised with the delight and elation I felt at my children's birth, but the feelings I had with the arrival of each grandchild was beyond anything I had experienced. Perhaps tears of joy and love flowed easily because their arrival did not include long hours of intense labor pains. In spite of my chaotic upbringing, I rarely lacked optimism. I believed there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and every horrid experience was an opportunity to better understand. The journey to become a grandmother was rocky, but the grandchildren made it worthwhile. Bursting with happiness, the goal I set for myself as a child became reality. Parenting taught me humility. but grandparenting is about learning to play and enjoy the nuances of life. Yes, now I just might know enough, be enough, and certainly the capacity for love to grow happens when I stay in the present moment. My job is simply to be there, tune in, laugh, play, and love these kids just as they are, no matter how they show up or who they show up with. Loving them unconditionally is a gift to myself. Their existence is all that is required. Imagine sending such wholehearted love to the next generation with the possibility that it will reach future generations. All one needs to be a grandmother is a child willing to have children. I was glad that both of my kids wanted to grow up a bit before they had theirs. My children may not be so lucky as to experience the joy of grandparenting. Besides a global pandemic of low sperm counts, there seems to be less desire amongst young people to have their own children. I overheard a conversation between my two grandsons. We were at the cottage and they were lying in bed chit-chatting. Robert Alexander, my firstborn grandchild, the wisest and most experienced at 14, said to his 6-year-old cousin, "Samson, one day we will grow up and have kids. They will be cousins." "I don't think so, Robert Alexander. One day you will be my age, or maybe 18 or 20, meet a girl and want to have kids." "No, I don't think so." "You will change your mind. I used to think like you, but you will see that you will think differently when you grow older and go to high school like me." "No, I don't think so." Light-hearted reality as it stood in 2017. We will see what wants to happen. As each one navigates their developmental stages from babies to adulthood, I have the opportunity to slow down and treasure what I missed with my children. It is easier to be present and fully value what's happening in their lives when there is no pressure to cook, clean, pay the bills, or contemplate the ills of the world. It is easier as a grandparent to appreciate the different qualities each child brings to the family system. My eldest, now 18, is responsible and committed to physical fitness, football, financial planning, and even relishes hamming it up with a good argument just for the sake of arguing. His sister loves Lego, understands power tools better than her classmates in shop class, and at 14 teaches swimming, enjoys drama and math. Her cousin, also 14, is an artist in their heart and soul, who takes pleasure in preparing Asian cuisine and believes in freedom of fashion and gender diversity. This grandchild is teaching me to use the pronoun they rather than he or she. It is still confusing to me, but I try my best. You may find it confusing as well. Apparently, it's all about not being bound by any gender. This one may show up wearing their father's 3X size t-shirt and pants, or a tight dress with heels. This one loves art and is often seen face painting at community events. Their brother will serenade you with the first 100 numbers of pi or Harry Potter in 99 seconds. He loves math and science. He is teaching me how to play chess. Thank goodness it's on the computer program that gives me hints on what I can do and not do. I expect to win a game someday soon. Grandchildren ask the best questions, give the best hugs, and will talk to you as long as you listen. Children, grandchildren are our future. They get to take part in adventures we didn't even imagine and ask questions we didn't think of. Grandparents can sit back and watch their grandchildren's lives unfold in the most unique and miraculous ways. I'm happy to be known as the grandmother passing along what she didn't receive. And if one of my grandchildren were to find themselves in similar shoes as my grandfather and find themselves repeating aspects of his life, I expect that my love will reach them from beyond, give them a peck on the cheek while telling them I believe in their goodness and that they are my family no matter what. I hope they will know that I will embrace them just the same when we reunite on the other side of the veil. Grandchildren are our emerging future, and we as grandparents are their ancestors and their foundation, just as our grandparents are ours. Yes, even the scoundrels. When the grandkids visit, I tell them, I am the luckiest grandmother in the world. Often I am blessed with a warm embrace. They are my opportunity to send love forward. Everything I give them seems to shower back onto me. While they may one day see me as their legacy, there is no doubt that they are mine.